Dandadan Season 2 just ended with a wild cliffhanger, and a lot of fans are dying to know what happens next. Well, there's steps you can take right now if you really want to know. Plus, there's some good news coming in the future. But before we get into that, let's talk about all of the crazy action, the cool payoff of things that were set up in prior arcs, plus all the neat little Easter eggs that you can find. Let's get into all of it with the final episode of Season 2, Clash, Space Kaiju vs. Giant Robot. It looks a lot cooler than this. Thanks to the amazing power of the nano skin, Kinta's managed to visualize both a really cool robot entry sequence and a formation sequence, even if it's Momo who ended up visualizing the design of the machine. They even tear the Tori gate out of the ground to turn it into a headpiece. I'm not sure it was actually part of the nanoskin, and honestly this seems like it could be sacrilege, but it looks really cool, so nobody is complaining. I love how much every part of this is powered by the nanoskin. Even the manual that Kinta's using is just his sci-fi magazine connected via glowing string to the mech, because Kinta believed that this thing should have a manual, and therefore it must. And it's also interesting because it makes you wonder if the nanoskin is itself using his magazine as a manual for how a giant robot should exist. We don't know for sure. Too bad he's too busy making meta references, tropey poses, and cliche remarks to actually focus on what buttons he should be pressing. It's almost like he's wanted to pilot a giant robot his whole life, and now he's trying to speedrun every dream scenario he can think of. Anyway, with 5 simultaneous button presses, they release a cuckoo bird, the robot's tongue, the robot's hand, the robot's back accessories, and Okarun, who is flying off in an ejector seat, because of course Kinta would think this robot should have an ejector seat. Meanwhile, it's Evil Eye who's been screaming that he wants to be let out the whole time. Talk about a bad start. There's a few fun details about these scenes. Notice how when they press the buttons, Ira's is a pink sparkly heart gem because that's objectively cute, and Kinta's is a heavy switch because that's objectively the way that mechs should be designed. Or how the monitors display Japanese words but they're written in English characters because we see that in so many other mecha anime. How about the monitor which displays some useful facts about the kaiju like its size and its horns, but also some self-aggrandizing comments to Kinta like how he's a genius. And then there's the fact that all of the teens' visualizations fed into the creation of this mech, which means one of them had to have visualized the cuckoo clock for it to even be there. This episode in particular had a lot of fun little jokes and references that were clearly put in for the audience, but also for the animators to enjoy. You can tell that they went wild trying to fit in as much as they could now that they finally got to do an episode with a giant robot in it. With Okarun still flying into the distance, the remaining 4 are getting beaten up and thrown around by this surprisingly flexible kaiju. Good thing somebody visualized airbags. When Evil Eye manages to finally burst his way out of it, I bet motion-sick Ira wishes she could do the same. He manages to lift up the entire kaiju by its leg and throat, which is very impressive, although he's then blasted away by the shockwave. Pay attention to Evil Eye in this episode, because I think his high-energy antics and his unflappable non-concern about the other kids might just make him the funniest part of this finale. Just look at him shadowboxing in the background while Okarun is busy worrying about his friends. Luckily, all he cares about is if he and Okarun can finally have a deathmatch right now. What an overly excited, childlike, murderous little guy he is. Okarun's faced with a difficult choice here. Does he ask Evil Eye to get involved with the fight, which might then involve him backing out of the agreement to only fight with Okarun from now? And if he does that, would they be exchanging one massive risk for a much smaller but equally dangerous one? Luckily, right as Okarun is potentially about to make the wrong choice, Kinta realizes not just how to pilot the robot, but also how to transform it mid-fight into this lithe golden machine with long arms and the face of a Chad. Plus, check out those Gurren Lagann style sunglasses. This thing oozes coolness. And if I missed any other references in the design, let me know in the comments, or Kinta will never let me hear the end of it. It turns out the robot pilots the same way it transforms, with the power of visualization. The reason Kinta's able to pilot with those 2 handles is because based off of so many mecha anime he's watched, that's how he believes it should be piloted. And now that he's realized he can pilot with mental intent, we have a mecha otaku who's dreamed of piloting a giant robot thousands of times, given an actual giant robot with the ability to constantly transform itself. The robot is him. Don't interrupt the moment, Momo. Kinta the End of Joy Pegasus is moving out, a clear Gundam reference. And this kaiju doesn't stand a chance. And with that, we get one last run of the incredible Season 2 OP. I think I'm gonna make a separate video about this because I hear some folks still don't enjoy it as much, and I think that might just come from not realizing the story that's being told through the visuals. Plus, Aina the End did an incredible job with this song, and I will not stand for any disrespect going her way. Jumping back to our hero, the End of Joy Pegasus, we see him wailing on the kaiju with a series of very common attack moves given very absurd attack names. Blazing Wind for a frontal punch, Daedalus Attack for a spin kick, Rocket Punch for throwing the robot's dismembered fist at the kaiju, and Ultramagnetic Wave Tornado for grabbing it by its tail and spinning it in a circle. At least Kinta's having fun doing this, and honestly, it's entertaining enough that I would take 20 more minutes of him doing it. It's also funny seeing how he can't quite replicate Momo's lightning deflection technique from the prior episode. This robot may be massive and agile, but everyone else's superpowers also have their own advantages. Maybe that's something Kinta should be picking up on. Notice how the other two teen boys are losing their minds and we're not hearing anything from the girls? Not that girls don't also enjoy giant robots, but clearly this has awakened something in Okarun and in Evil Eye, who is a couple hundred years old evil spirit. It's also awakening something in me. Where's my giant robot, Tatsu-sensei? I cannot wait until the day they release a figure of the great Kinta Bodhisattva, golden version. As the fight moves towards the city and the kaiju starts keeping up with Kinta, we get to see that he had the sad, bullied childhood that unfortunately a lot of nerdy kids can relate to. And the Kensuke Ushio soundtrack perfectly matches the somber tone of this flashback. If you weren't already connecting with our new robot fanboy, seeing his interest belittled by his classmates and his determination to stand up in front of that will win over even the harshest of critics. Just like he reached for his precious Gunpla figure, now he's got a real robot to reach for. He may not know how to talk to girls and win their hearts, but he knows what's in his heart, and is to keep fighting like the men he admires. His scream of "I love robots" had me screaming right along with him, and I bet a number of you were as well. Seeing that he went on thrill rides to train his body to one day withstand the pressure of piloting a giant robot, plus his use of wild motion maneuvers, proves he is the one person in this universe truly most deserving of the role. It's too bad that the kaiju can go invisible, and it keeps deploying the airbag on him. It's fortunate for Kinta, and his dwindling collection of glasses, that this finally gives Ira and Momo enough time to get over their motion sickness. Now we realize why we haven't heard from the girls in so long. And if you remember Kinta's earlier line about how the robot increased their power fivefold, even though he was probably just quoting a mecha anime that he watched, it does seem like the nanoskin has the ability to enhance their supernatural powers. And the two girls use their powers to pull the robot back together into an even cooler third form that makes up for its flimsier construction. Now there's another Dandadan robot figure that I need to have. After deploying motion sickness against their enemy in a way I don't even think the Geneva Conventions would allow for, Momo shows Kinta Great Emperor Pegasus Sakata that the strongest move is to let gravity do the work. And with that move, we see the kaiju deflate back down to that smaller size, and everybody's pulled back out of the pocket dimension and back into the real world, where hundreds of surprised onlookers are now staring up at a giant robot. The girls turn it into a very weird flying saucer, clearly a mix of not paying attention well and maybe the stress of the situation, but regardless, everybody can see it. We even hear someone call out, "It's a UFO!" and someone else points out, "No, it's a UAP," which is a reference to the fight that Momo and Okarun had back in the very first episode. They fly it back to the countryside and revert it back to a very strange rendition of the house merged with parts of the robot. And unfortunately for the girls, it looks like they did not prioritize making the bathrooms easy to find. As Ira and Momo are spewing rainbow sparkles into the new robot toilets, Okarun manages to trick Evil Eye into transforming back with a meat bun. You might remember in an earlier episode that Evil Eye has been discovering the joys of taiyaki-flavored drinks and stuffing yakisoba noodles into his mouth with his hands, and Okarun's clearly picked up on that trick, and I imagine we're going to see that again where they use the joys of modern food to get Evil Eye to do what they want. Regardless, Gigi and Okarun pick up the heavy monster and carry it all the way back to the house in the countryside, in the meantime outrunning all of their pursuers, which I think might be an anime original. And notice that they comment on how heavy the kaiju is. We already know that Gigi's in great physical shape. He can run behind a car that his mom is speeding through a city with, and we've seen him carry at least a Kinta load pretty easily. But clearly Okarun's also getting stronger. Guess all of his behind-the-school weightlifting is actually paying off. The boys make it back looking dazzling and excited, which is also a great payoff to seeing how close they've gotten after, the head-to-head argument that they were having back in episode 1 of this season. With Kinta's overbearing Char-like behavior utterly failing in the face of Okarun and Gigi's honest praise for the work that he did, all that's left is for Okarun to recognize that there's a zipper in this kaiju. And with both Kinta and Gigi refusing to touch it, that leaves Okarun to unzip the creature and find a blonde girl who looks like she's about their age? As Momo comes out of the house, she witnesses what we know a lot of shippers are going to be screaming about on social media for the next couple of weeks. With the nanoskin heart of the house in her hand transforming into a representation of Momo's own heart, we see a visualization of her feelings in that moment fed back to the home and causing it to explode in a callback to the very first episode of this show. There's a fair bit of evidence that this may have initially been planned as one continuous 24-episode season, and this is one of the most obvious. So for those of you absolutely panicking in the comments and on social media about this cliffhanger, I have two pieces of incredible news for you. And the first isn't really much of a surprise, which is that a season 3 of the anime was announced as soon as this episode ended. Given that we've seen more studios looking to have a recurring popular series running over many years to bring in the fans and the revenue, it's no surprise that Science Saru is looking to keep this one going. There's enough manga right now for at least 3 more seasons, and the next arc, which would be in season 3, many fans would agree that that's the best one, although I would contend that the series just keeps getting better. But the team will need time and resources to make the next season, so I'm fine waiting however many years it takes for Science Saru to make this up to their standards without burning out anyone on the team. So in even better news, you don't have to wait until season 3 comes out to find out what happens next, because the manga exists. The season ends on chapter 71, and so you can pick up volume 9 in your nearest bookstore, or read it for free on the Manga Plus app if that's available in your country. There's probably some other options, and immediately find out what happens after this cliffhanger. Dandadan is one of those series where the manga and the anime are amazing for different reasons, and enjoying the story in a different medium allows you to pick up on other details and appreciate those differences. The anime, for example, has that loose Science Saru style that lends itself well to frenetic action and the goofy moments. You've got the incredible voice acting and the soundtrack, Yamashiro's color choices for the different creatures, and then of course you've got the incredible liberties that they took in certain scenes, like enhancing the Acro Silky part in episode 7, or giving us more of Kinta's backstory in the episode he's introduced. Meanwhile, the manga has incredibly detailed artwork, really clever paneling, and Tatsu-sensei not only draws some of the most densely packed and gorgeous 2-page spreads, but he's been in the habit of doing way more of them than you would anticipate occurring in a weekly manga. The man didn't even take a week off until the end of the next arc that we'll see in season 3. Tatsu-sensei's insane in all of the best ways. So with that said, you can pick up right on chapter 72 to find out what's going on with that seemingly alien girl giving Okarun mouth to mouth. But I'm willing to bet some of you are gonna actually go back and start the manga from the beginning, because reading the story again is a great way to catch new details and also some of the foreshadowing that you might have missed on a first viewing. There's always a lot going on in the background of this story. Anyway, that's a wrap for this season of Dandadan, but maybe not for my videos on it. I'm thinking of doing a breakdown of this season's OP compared to the storytelling of the season 1 OP, and also maybe sitting down with a friend who's a fellow manga reader to assess and analyze these 2 seasons from a manga fan's perspective. Let me know if you'd be interested in either of those topics, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.